Hello, everyone. This is Charles Chamberlain. I'm the Executive Director of Democracy for America. I want to thank you so much for joining us on the call tonight. I know that folks are angry and confused and hurting, and the truth is I'm hurting too. But I'm also energized to be on the phone with you and to talk about what happened and what we're going to do next. As we said in the statement we released on the night that Donald Trump was elected, we want to be absolutely clear. The election of Donald Trump is an unmitigated catastrophe for this country and potentially the world. And Democracy for America will do everything in our power to obstruct, delay, and resist the attacks that will emerge from Donald Trump's administration on people of color, disabled Americans, women, Muslims, the LGBTQ community, and working families. It's more clear than ever that we need to reform the Democratic Party, that we need a true 50-state strategy to clean house and rebuild from the grassroots up, that our country needs a massive, multiracial, multi-generational, progressive political revolution led by women and people of color that is not beholden to the broken political establishment that brought us to this moment. And that's precisely what we'll work with you all and our allies to build in the days and weeks and months ahead. Now, we have a lot to cover tonight, and here's a quick run of how the show will go. We're going to hear from Congresswoman-elect Pramila Jayapal. Then we'll hear from Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, and then from Congressman Keith Ellison. And afterwards, we'll take your questions. And speaking of which, I want to make sure you know how to ask a question. If you'd like to ask a question during this call, please press 0 on your phone, and you'll be connected with a DFA staff member. Again, please press 0 right now if you'd like to ask a question. And if you're listening to this call on our website at democracyforamerica.com/live, you can also submit a question through the live web stream. Now, even on a terrible election night, we did manage to win some important victories, and you did incredible work. DFA members made more than 2.5 million person-to-person voter contact calls and helped to elect powerful new leaders, particularly women of color who broke barriers and will help to change our country. Because of you, dynamic and progressive DFA Democrats like Catherine Cortez Masto, Tammy Duckworth, Kamala Harris, Maggie Toulouse-Oliver, Michael Tubbs, Ken Fox, the list goes on, were elected on Tuesday and against all odds. Your volunteer work, knocking on doors and on the phones, and your financial contributions to these candidates and to DFA made their elections possible. And when they go on to change this country and the world in the years to come, you can be proud of the role you played in making that possible. And we're thrilled tonight to be joined by one of those incredible newly elected officials tonight. Pramila Jayapal ran a powerful campaign on the principles and values of the political revolution, and she earned an early endorsement from Democracy for America. We delivered raising money. We were directly embedded in the campaign. Our volunteer energy helped fuel the door-to-door traffic that made it possible to reach to voters across the Seattle neighborhoods and help make sure she won. And I'm very, very excited to welcome Congresswoman-elect Jayapal to the call. Congresswoman, are you there?
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much, Charles. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Charles, and thank you, DFA, for the incredible work that you did to help elect me, to help elect we. For those of you that worked on my campaign, you know that I always said this was not about electing me. This was about electing we. It's about taking the voice of working people to the United States Congress. And our victory on Tuesday was bittersweet. It was extremely sweet because we won with 57% of the vote. And it was a remarkable victory because of the way we won that election, because of you, DFA members, because of a grassroots operation where we had 1,100 active volunteers on the campaign, and we knocked on over 160,000 doors. We made over 250,000 phone calls. So that was the sweet part. The bitter part was that, I think we all are waking up from a stupor, from a shock. We are fearful about what lies ahead for America. And I have, in the past 24 hours, I have gone to 2 different vigils, rallies with people who are deeply afraid for their safety, Muslims who fear that they are going to be subjected to civil liberties abuses, undocumented immigrants who fear that they're going to be deported. And I think that we are in a place where we are still processing what has happened. And I will just say, as somebody who stood up against the Bush administration after 9/11, who defended the rights of Muslims at that time, who stopped illegal deportations of people across this country, somebody who has fought for immigration reform, that what I bring to my mind in this moment is the 27 undocumented immigrants who got arrested with me many years ago when we did a civil disobedience protest. It was the largest group of undocumented women who had ever been arrested for civil disobedience, and they did that knowing that they might be deported for what they did, for their courage. And so I think that we all have to understand and process exactly where we are, that whatever feelings that we might be having are valid and real, and there is nothing shameful about being afraid. But what we have to understand is what we do with that fear. And what I believe we need to do with that fear is channel it into organizing, into movement building, into redoing and rethinking our party and exactly what the party is standing for, and forcing the political revolution that so many of you have already been working on and that so many of us have been pushing for together. This is not a moment for us to sit back. It is not a moment that we're going to get through quickly. If, Dr. King said that the moral arc of the universe is long. He said it was long. There is a moral arc of the universe, but it is long, and it does bend towards justice, but it requires our collective hands on the arc to make sure it bends in the right way. And that means that we will need every single one of you on the phone to help us build the movement. And I intend to stand up and fight in Congress. I have never backed away from a fight. I don't intend to start now. But we are going to need every single one of us to be filled with love for each other and compassion for each other, but also the fire and the courage of what it is going to take to make sure that we really protect the rights, the basic rights of everybody in this country, and fight back against what promises to be a lot of unrolling of some of the progress that we've made, and really push towards advancing a different kind of a transformational politics in this country. So I am really looking forward to doing that. It is not the fight I intended to have right away. It is not the Congress I wanted to go into, but it is, I think, what courage is about when you are able to stand up even in those moments where you may not feel in this very moment like we have the answer, but it is our courage of coming together, of organizing, of building our movement that is going to allow us to build the kind of power that we need to make sure we take back our country. So thank you all so much for the work that you did on so many elections across the country. And let's not forget that we do have some bright spots, and I will tell you I've been overwhelmed by the thousands and thousands of messages that I've gotten from this district and from people across the country, the ways in which I've been stopped on the street, and just, I understand what the responsibility is here, and we are going to fight as hard as we can, and we are going to make sure that we win, because that is what we have done over and over again in this country. And that is what we will continue to do, and we will use this energy to build the kind of movement that we are going to have in this country for all of us to move forward. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Representative Jayapal. I mean, Congresswoman-elect, feels good to say that, and very excited to hear your thoughts. Next up, I want to welcome our chair, Jim Dean. Jim, are you on the call? You might be muted.
I was indeed muted. I apologize for that. But thank you, Charles. I do want to extend my heartfelt thanks to all of you who are on this call for joining us, particularly at a time like this when we're going to pull ourselves together and see what we can do to move this country forward in spite of what happened in the presidential election. And no better example than the person we just heard from. We are so grateful to you, Congresswoman-elect Pramila Jayapal, for your leadership, not only in this campaign and your election, but all that you've done as a community organizer and activist. And it has been remarkable. It is a remarkable tale, and it's just beginning, and we are absolutely thrilled. We are also here to welcome two other outstanding individuals, Congressman Keith Ellison and our next guest, former Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, to this call, and we're really going to be thrilled to hear from him. And certainly, Robert Reich is there are few that equal his energy, his enthusiasm, and his thought leadership for all of us in changing this country and not only bringing progressive leadership, but making this country reflect the will of the voters, which frankly is quite progressive, particularly when it comes to issues like income inequality. We have been very grateful and fortunate to be able to partner with Robert Reich on projects like his movie Inequality for All, his book Saving Capitalism for the Many and Not the Few, and we're certainly looking forward to hearing what he has to say tonight. So without further ado, Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for being on this call and joining us as well.
Well, thank you, Jim, and Charles, and the DFA generally for everything you're doing. Congresswoman Jayapal, congratulations to you. I would not be sincere if I didn't talk about the despair and the fear I certainly felt Tuesday, and today I guess it's turned more into anger. And anger is not bad. In fact, the themes I want to talk to you about is the uses of anger, because the angrier we are and the more activated and directional that we can, the more we can channel that anger into real constructive change and blocking things that are bad, so much the better. I mean, I think, first of all, we do have to fight bigotry in all its forms, and we've got to be absolutely vigilant against it, whether it's African Americans, racism, Latinos, women, any kind, Muslims or immigrants or the disabled or LGBTQ, any kind of bigotry that has been unleashed by this campaign, by Donald Trump. Giving permission to that kind of bigotry is something that we have got to be alert to, and we've got to fight as individuals, as communities, and we have got this is the glue that keeps America together. That kind of the tolerance, the social capital, the sense that we are together and we are a community. And so I think our first responsibility is to look out for the civil rights, civil liberties, to fight bigotry, and to make sure that poison is limited and contained. The second thing I want to talk about is the economy, because it's not just bigotry that was ignited by Donald Trump and given permission and legitimized. It was also the anger and fear that a lot of people have who have been losing ground, particularly those without college degrees. That's where a lot of his support came from, particularly white men without college degrees. Those are the ones who feel most aggrieved and most angry at the system. But it's not just white men. It is also a lot of people, according to the exit polls, who feel that the establishment as a whole, the politics as usual, doesn't work anymore. They wanted to shake things up. They thought Hillary Clinton was too much a representative of the establishment, of big business and big corporations and Wall Street and finance, and they were determined to shake things up. I think that anger, if it is utilized correctly, if it is channeled correctly, can be a force for positive political change. After all, I mean, Bernie Sanders and his indignation and the way in which he went about getting 22 states in the Democratic primaries, 47% of the vote in the Democratic primaries, also capitalized and utilized and was built upon that anger against business as usual, a system that is fundamentally corrupt in the sense that there is too much wealth at the top that is influencing politics, that there's not enough of division between politics and the wealth that has been created in part by rigging the system. And I think that's still out there. I think you can't look at what has happened without understanding that this has been a huge refutation of the establishment politics. Political organization has got to be changed. I mean, the Democratic Party can no longer be the same. It has been repudiated. And I think one of the first things we have to do in organization terms is make sure that the Democratic National Committee is reformed. We have to give it new leadership. I think the people who are on the Democratic National Committee, they may be fine people. I'm sure they are. I know many of them, but they've got to relinquish control right now and we've got to put in people who are genuinely committed to a different kind of Democratic Party. What's happened to the Democratic National Committee, and again, I don't want to in any way denigrate anybody's efforts, but what's happened to it over the years, and I've seen it over the last 35 years, is that it has become more of a fundraising machinery for raising a lot of money from big fundraisers and from big money than it has been a vehicle for organizing at the grassroots, at the state level, at the local level, and organizing in an ongoing way, organizing between elections, organizing in ways that people feel that they are part of something important. That's what we've got to restore to the Democratic Party. That's what we've got to give breath to. And if the Democratic Party can't do it, then we'll do it through a third party. I mean, we've got to make sure that there is a vehicle for Americans who want to say no, not just to bigotry, but also to widening inequality, and stand up for average working Americans, create a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition that will take back this country. And it's also environmental, it's also health, it's poverty, civil rights, it's finance. I mean, right now, today, some of the Trump teams were actually in Washington, in the Treasury Department, in some of the agencies, with the goal of dismembering the Dodd-Frank Act. I mean, they're going to try to do basically everything that we fear they're going to try to do, and the power that we have, the only power we have, we don't have power anymore electorally except through great Congresspeople and Democrats, but they're not in the majority. We have the power of the people. We have the power of organizing and mobilizing. We must do that, and we must have an organization that enables and promotes that. Every morning, we should be getting a notice, an email notice or some sort of notice telling us what the day's major battles are, not only at the state level, not only at the federal level, but also at the state level. At the states, if you are lucky enough to be in a progressive state, so as I am here in California, there is a great deal of work we can do to model for the rest of the nation what is possible. I mean, don't forget, the fighting Bob La Follette, even in the Gilded Age, Wisconsin at that time was a seat of progressivism, as it has been since, but it modeled for the rest of the nation what was possible. And when it is possible again, hopefully we can run candidates and will run candidates, progressive candidates in primaries in 2018, and we will run a president in 2020. And we will have a progressive agenda because that is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party right now. That is also where the demographics are leading us. If you look at where the voters are, it's not just solely the rural, older, white male voters. It is a voting population that is changing dramatically and changing particularly in the Democratic Party in a progressive way if people are inspired, if people feel that they're part of something. So I just want to end on what is difficult to actually create, but that is an upbeat moment, an upbeat statement, and that is that, as an old labor organizer friend of mine once said, and it's an old labor organizing adage, that the worse the boss is, the easier it is to organize the workers. If we have a Donald Trump who is as bad as many of us believe he is and will be, we are going to get organized, but the question is how well, how immediately, how powerfully. And I want, for one thing, a Democratic Party or a third party that does that and does it well and mobilizes and organizes us to be a powerful army that stops the bad stuff and pushes and demands the good stuff.
Well, thank you so much, Robert Reich, for your words of wisdom and for your continuing leadership on the work that's got to be done. You mentioned we need great leaders. Well, we've got one right here. That's coming on, and that is Congressman Keith Ellison, who his own unique brand of energy and enthusiasm has really been contagious. And I have had the pleasure of seeing his great work with the Congressional Progressive Caucus, both at the conference level and right down to the nitty-gritty. I mean, this is a get-it-done guy, and he has certainly provided great leadership to all of us, and particularly with his support and his activism on the Sanders campaign and the Sanders primary, which did so much to keep this election real for all of us, and put our best foot forward and actually win the elections that were able to win, particularly in view of Bernie's support of great candidates like Pramila Jayapal. So, Congressman Ellison, thank you so much for adding to this effort and again for your leadership, and take it away.
Hey, Jim, thanks a ton, man, and Charlie and everybody at DFA, blessing. Hey, to Dr. Reich, you're one of my very favorite people in the whole wide world. Thank you for doing what you do. And Pramila, you know, I couldn't be more excited about your victory. As you know, the Progressive Caucus supported you. I came out to Washington to campaign with you, and you know what? You know, you're the light, and we definitely are excited that you're in there. Here's the thing, everybody. Be very clear. In 2 years, first of all, now we can present a very clear alternative to the American people as to what we could have if we organize and engage. We have to use the First Amendment, our right to freedom of expression, to oppose the Trump and Trumpism at every turn. That's what we do now. We use petition. We use marching. We have to engage with progressive members in Congress and state and local legislatures to raise the key issues. But then understand, in 2 years, we can flip this thing, but we can't flip it just by hoping for that. That flipping it means that we got to acknowledge a few basic facts. One is that Trump was only elected with about 25% of eligible voters. In fact, he didn't even win the popular vote. Most people who voted didn't vote for him. This is very important to understand. In that way, he may be technically the president, but most Americans didn't vote for him. They voted for his opponent. This is key for us to understand in terms of our legitimate opposition to what his proposal is. Also, it's important to be clear. He came out with a 100-day program, which is nothing short of frightening. He's talking about repealing the EPA in the light of Flint. He's talking about our efforts for the Dakota Access Pipeline and Keystone. All these things are in jeopardy because of what is going on here. A Supreme Court justice appointment, very serious. And not only that, it's not just Trump, it's the people who's going to appoint. I mean, Rudy Giuliani is among the scariest people around. And with him as an attorney general or head of Homeland Security, we're going to have to stand up and fight, no doubt about it. So we have our work cut out for it. So what do we do now? The thing we got to do now is, yes, it's true, we need a real infusion of energy in the Democratic Party. That's a fact. We got an infusion of energy and a new spirit and a new vision. It's going to have to happen. But what is that vision? That vision is going to have to be a vision that says not donors first, not polls first, not models first, but voters first. And can we reach out to every single voter with a progressive message? Now, you should know, and Bernie Sanders gets a ton of credit for this, we have the most progressive Democratic platform we've ever seen. We can take that platform and we can go. If we're willing to take it to every door in America, we can excite people so that we can have a wave election in 2018 and reinstitute some of the things they're about to damage. But it's all going to have to depend upon our ability to, one, hold Trump accountable at every single turn. Make sure that every single thing he does is known to the voting populace. Make sure that people know what he's taken away from them. So he says he's going to repeal the Affordable Care Act. The 20 million people and the hundreds of million people who benefited from provisions of that act should be very well aware about what they're losing and who's causing them to lose it. He's proposing a tax bill that's going to enrich the wealthy and drive up the debt even more. We've got to make sure that the American people know what's at stake. I think this is a movement moment. It truly is a movement moment. I want to acknowledge the pain and the fear that people have. I myself am an adherent of one of the faith groups that he has identified as a target. But I'm telling you, we have to see through our tears at this moment, dig down into our faith and what animates us and what we believe in, and really lace up our sneakers and really get out there on the street. Now, I just want to say finally that I would urge everyone to examine the fact that we had low voter turnout. Our turnout, we won Minnesota, but only by 2 points. I'm telling you that in the 5th Congressional District of Minnesota, we outperformed the state average by like more than 50,000 votes. If we hadn't a spiked turnout in the 5th District, we would have lost just like they did in Wisconsin and Michigan. But turnout was the key. But it's not just, but what is turnout? Turnout is a function of inspiration and shoe leather and smart techniques. It is a rejection of the idea that people get out of there, that people will go vote just because of an expensive television ad. It takes human contact, organizing on the ground. Old as this country, old techniques like just relationship building. And so I want everybody on this call to feel, yes, concerned, but also hopeful that if we seize the moment right now, we can push forward a progressive agenda. On a positive note, you should know that at least 4 states passed an increase in the minimum wage. Washington State increased $13.50 by 2020. Colorado increased the minimum wage. 2 other states did as well. We liberalized marijuana laws in several states, including Florida for medical marijuana. Why is that? Because people know that you shouldn't be throwing people in prison for something that actually can bring them pain alleviation and things like that. But this whole war on drugs, it was struck a blow by several states there where they liberalized their marijuana laws. The fact is, the real question is, from a Democratic Party standpoint, how is it that the minimum wage is winning in states where our candidates are not? We've got to ask ourselves a question. People like the policies we stand for, but they don't associate us with those policies, and that is the challenge that we have. So I just want to say I'm ready to fight. My shoelaces are tied up tight, and I'm ready to get out on that court. And I want to thank you, Pramila, for going to those vigils and standing with people, because that is the kind of leadership that inspires. You got to go with the people. You got to walk the picket lines with them. You got to be out there with them, and then that's how they begin to trust you and know that what you're telling them is sincere, and that's what leadership's all about. So I just want to say to everybody in DFA, Dr. Reich, Charlie Chamberlain, Jim, Dean, Pramila, everybody, thanks for allowing me on the call.
You bet. Thank you so much, Keith. And, we're going to open up to questions. I've got a great question in the queue here on a number of different issues. We're going to talk about how we're going to fight Trump and what we can expect in the days and weeks and months ahead. I got questions for Pramila, for Robert, but I do want to start with the question of our next DNC chair. DFA founder Governor Howard Dean announced on Twitter just a few hours ago that he's going to run for the DNC chair. And this morning, Bernie announced that he wants to see Keith. He wants to see you be the next chair. And Keith, I know you haven't even announced if you're going to run for it, but I think everyone on this call would like to hear your thoughts. However, before I have that, I do want to say, here at DFA, we believe that the Democratic Party is at its best when its leaders have the courage to compete for the best ideas, the best practices, and the best people. We also believe that part of the reason we have to deal with Donald Trump is because prior to the start of the 2016 race, Democratic Party insiders got together around conference tables in Washington, D.C., and more or less decided who the presidential nominee would be without listening to the party's grassroots base. And that's wrong, and that's part of the reason why we lost. So I want to say this. We here at DFA hope that there will be a vigorous, forward-looking competition for the leadership of the Democratic Party, and we strongly believe that the party's grassroots base, not party insiders and political elites, should play the decisive role in choosing who our next party's leader should be, period. So now my question, Congressman Ellison, and like I said, I know you're not going to make an announcement this evening, but I do want to ask you this. What do you think the next chair of the Democratic Party has to be focused on to ensure that Democrats retake the House and Senate in 2018 and beat Donald Trump once and for all in 2020?
Well, I will announce that I'm going to make an announcement on Monday. So there you go.
Excellent.
But, well, let me just tell you, the key has got to be a turnout-based, grassroots-based Democratic Party that uses relationship building, one-to-one, not based on modeling, based on relationships, where we turn on during the off year based on issue advocacy so that people know that we care. And see, right now it kind of feels like we kind of go to people when the big elections come up. We have to be a part of people's lives all the time. And that means taking an inspiring platform to people's door every single day and building local party units with a priority of turning out the vote at the proper time. But it all starts with relationship building at the grassroots level. Then we got to have greater coordination. Let me tell you, if a member of the House of Representatives is in a state where the Senate, where there's going to be a lot of Senate seats up, like there's going to be in 2018, if you were in a so-called safe seat, right now, basically we ask you for money, but what we really should be doing is asking you to, one, strengthen and support your local state party, and also spiking the vote in your so-called safe seat, because every time a member of Congress in a so-called safe seat Dem increases turnout, that helps the statewide. That helps us win the governorship. That helps us win the Senate. And and it also helps local state senators and state representatives win. And it helps city council members win. I think the DNC should be a force to help and connect with local officials, because local officials are the ones where we're seeing all kinds of green initiatives passing, wages, fair scheduling, increase the minimum wage. That's where the action is. So I see turnout, greater coordination and collaboration, relationship-based initiatives, which kind of say that, which put TV as a tool, not as a go-to, which puts econometric modeling as is not allowing that kind of expensive stuff substitute for getting Dems together around a pot of chili and getting to know them every single place. And I think we need a chair who's going to go lead some door knocks around this country in the off year, so that people get to know them and they get to feel like this is their party, that this is the party of the working men and women of this country. So that's where it's at. I mean, I think between students, people in labor unions, the right to collective bargaining, the environmental movement, we need a Democratic Party where people feel that is what that is what their party stands for and stands for them, and believes that the most important voice in the party is the grassroots voice, the voice of that lady who has been pouring coffee for 20 years and believes that it's the Democratic Party that's going to make sure she gets her Social Security. But right now, does she even know us? Does she know where the building is? We've got to change that, and that's my vision for it.
Thank you, Keith. That makes a lot of sense, and it's really great to hear that from somebody who quite possibly could be the next DNC chair. So it's fantastic to hear you say that kind of, have that kind of attitude and opinion about where we need to go. We need to go right now to questions from DFA members directly. I'm going to put somebody on the line. I think this first question is a question that could probably be answered. In fact, I'm confident that Secretary of Labor Robert Reich is going to have thoughts on this. But I want to actually direct this call first to Pramila Jayapal, who is the new representative from Mark's district in Seattle. Mark, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. This is Mark Taylor Canfield from Seattle. I'm a journalist and activist living in Pramila's district, so as someone who's known you for many years, I would like to congratulate you on your election as a new member of the U.S. Congress.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Yes, I'm proud to know that a true progressive fighter will be there in Washington, D.C. to represent the people in my community. And after 14 terms of public service by Congressman Jim McDermott, it's really good to know that you'll be there to continue to fight for the progressive agenda that is so important for folks in my area of the country. And by the way, the first time I met you, Pramila, was when you were speaking on a megaphone outside of the INS Detention Center in Seattle. So I know where you're coming from on that issue.
Mark, that's fantastic. What's your question for Pramila?
Well, first of all, don't get mad, get organized. But my question is this. One of the most effective attributes of the Bernie Sanders campaign was his ability to reach out to members of the working class who are really struggling right now to pay their rents and mortgages, medical bills, college expenses. And that populist message was very popular even among independents and some conservatives. So how can the Democrats transform themselves into a party that really represents the working class? Because there's an impression amongst a lot of progressives that the entrenched establishment, including the DNC, have kind of lost touch with some of their base, the working class, something Donald Trump seemed to do better at. And, you know, his position on the TPP is actually closer to what a lot of progressives feel. So how do we increase the voter participation and reach out to the working class and get working class candidates to run in the Democratic Party?
Great question, Mark.
Well, I
Go
think
for it, Pramila.
It really is. I really agree with what Keith just said, what Representative Ellison, Congressman Ellison just said, which is, you know, and it's something we did in my campaign. I think most of you were part of this or know about this or contributed to it in some way, but 1,100 active volunteers, so many people who had never participated in an election before, 160,000 doors, 250,000 phone calls, 42,000 conversations with people. So we understood exactly where people were coming from. And it's exactly what Secretary Reich said. It is that people want to know that the system is not stacked against them. They want to know that the party and their candidates, their elected officials, are not controlled by big corporate money. They want to know that you are actually going to respond to them. And here in the state of Washington, if you look at income inequality in the state, you understand it very clearly when you see that between 2008 and 2012, all of the income growth in this state accrued to the top 1%. That is just not okay. And I think we have to, as a party, but also as a movement, which is far more important, by the way, in my mind, than anything else. But as a movement, we have got to make sure that we are speaking directly to people at their doors. And as Keith said, not just in election year when we want their vote, but all of the time, and really connecting with people and helping them to understand that there is a bridge between residents of a community and government, and it happens to be elected officials. But the movement right now has got to be resourced and able to continue that work and to actually put forward platforms that respond so that we don't just have platitudes. But, you know, I'll tell you, we passed a minimum wage here in the state. Very proud of the work we did to pass that. When I introduced the bill in the state Senate, we could not get everybody, even in the Democratic caucus, to endorse that increase in a minimum wage. And so you'll see, you know, that even in states like Arizona, where it went for Trump, you had an increase in the minimum wage. And by the way, we kicked out Sheriff Joe Arpaio. So there are some contradictions here, and I think the important thing is to understand that the economics of this matter greatly, and our ability to really call out and shun and then create our own system for campaigns, for elections, which is what Senator Bernie Sanders did. And it's what certainly in our campaign, we had 77,000 people across the country contribute to the campaign, and the average contribution was $23. We are turning on its head the way that people have seen the political system operating, and we are going to have to continue to do that in order to show working class people, white, brown, black, and yes, racism and sexism play deeply into this. You can't address one without addressing the other. But there really is an opportunity, I think, if there's any silver lining here, it is the opportunity now to stand very strong for what we believe in and to stand very strongly against what President Trump may put forward. And that is to make sure that we are showing very clearly, both through how we organize ourselves, how we finance ourselves, and what policies we put forward, that we are on the side of working people, of black, brown, and folks who are whether they're LGBTQ, disabled, whatever it is, that we are going to stand up for the most vulnerable in our country, and we are going to provide opportunity for everyone in our country.
Fantastic. Secretary Reich, I've got to imagine you've got thoughts on this as well. I'd love to hear it.
Well, my only thought is I worry that, we may not be thinking quite big enough in terms of what we are going to be up against. I think that an election. Every election is obviously critically important, but I think that Donald Trump and the Trump administration are going to be changing the rules in the Federal Trade Commission, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the Health and Human Services, the Education Department, the Department of Defense. And we need an army, almost, and I don't want to sound too dramatic about this, but I really think we almost need a resistance army that is able to put pressure on members of Congress all over the country and be alerted when there are changes in the rules, when there is regression back to really pre-New Deal kinds of deregulations, when Trump and the people he puts into office are going to really act in ways and do things that hurt working people and hurt average people and hurt black people and people who are very vulnerable in our system. It's going to be happening not so much through Congress. It will happen through Congress, of course, but it's also going to be happening because he is going to have the reins of the entire federal government. And I want a Democratic Party that is going to be able to alert people and mobilize people continuously and create in our American consciousness, and it's not just progressive. It's a coalition of people that care about these things. A lot of working people that would not even call themselves progressive necessarily, or maybe even call themselves Democrats, but they are going to be hurt, and they need to know about it, and they need to be able to put pressure on Congress, and they need to be able to put pressure even on the administration, and hold the administration and members of Congress in their districts accountable. We've not seen this degree of potential harm, not in the Reagan administration, and I suffered through that, not in the Richard Nixon administration, I suffered through that. This potential negative consequence is much larger, I think, than we are now contemplating or we are now talking about. And people can be mobilized. People want to be mobilized. Bernie Sanders did that. And young people want to be engaged and involved. I've had, over the last 2 days, I must have had 300, 400 letters, thousands of emails, people asking me, what can I do? What can I do tomorrow? What can I do the day after tomorrow? And we need an organization capable of telling people that.
I think that's a perfect lead-in, frankly, Robert, to the next call. We have Daniel from Chicago who's got a great question. Daniel?
Hi, this is Daniel from Chicago. My question is for everyone. I know Congressman Ellison touched on it, but I feel after the primaries, a lot of people became disenchanted and cynical, and I was wondering how we could figure out a way to mobilize all those people to continue to vote, because I feel as though the voter turnout was a little bit lower than we all expected, and I feel that's why we lost the election.
That's a great question. Robert, you want to take first crack?
Well, I think there was disenchantment in part because Hillary Clinton just felt to people. Now I've known her for almost 50 years. I don't tar her with this criticism, but she certainly felt to a lot of people to be too much part of the establishment, too close to big money, too close to Wall Street and big finance, and I think that Bernie's candidacy inspired so much excitement that when it was over, it felt like air being let out of the balloon, and I think that for a lot of Democrats, particularly young people, they were deeply, deeply disappointed. Again, I'm not faulting Hillary Clinton on this. I'm just saying that Bernie accomplished something that we've got to try to kind of instigate again and inspire again in an ongoing way.
Excellent. This next question is from Pramila. It's from Susie in Ames, Iowa. Susie, are you on the call?
Hello. I'm Susie Petra, and I'm a member of Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement here in Iowa. We are one of the states that now has a Republican governor. We lost both the House and the Senate at our state level. We aren't the only state where we are seeing the Democratic Party having made great losses. Bill Clinton's old 1980s corporate Wall Street elitism that we're talking about, that top-down, certainly was tone deaf to the working class. I'd like to be practical here. What can be done? How do we go about abolishing taking over the Democratic Party, completely dumping it probably as a political establishment venue?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Pramila, you want to take a shot at how we're going to have the grassroots take back the party?
Yeah, look, I am an organizer. That's what I've been my whole life. I've been arrested in a couple of civil disobedience protests that I've organized around comprehensive immigration reform, and I decided to get into politics, and I am a Democrat. I ran as a Democrat because I believe that we need more people from the movement in elected office, and that we need to actually have people who understand that the accountability is back to the movement. And that, I think, is something that we, Senator Sanders, through our revolution, and I think through his candidacy, brought a lot of people in. I will tell you that, I served as the only woman of color in the state Senate. And for me, what I have been able to see through my candidacy is the ability to inspire other people who are organizers to see themselves in elected office. And instead of just sort of, shaking our hands off of it and saying, well, politics is dirty and we're not going to get in there and we're going to fight from the outside, the reality is that we have to get on the inside too. And we have to actually create new systems of working inside and outside together in more effective ways. We haven't done that, in part because we don't have tons of movement organizers. We have some, for sure, and Congressman Ellison and others that understand what organizing is and come from that background. But I really do believe that there are a couple of ways to go about this. One is, you just decide to, create a third party and do it more effectively than we've been able to do that before. But the other is that we, and these are not mutually exclusive, by the way. I think you can do these at the same time. The other is that you continue to put the pressure on from inside. And in order to do that, we will have to elect more people who are really coming from that perspective and have fealty not to the party hierarchy, but actually back to a working class constituency that elects them. So that's why I got into this, and because I really believe that we have, as organizers, we've sort of washed our hands off of political office for its own sake, and we've said, we're going to organize from the outside, but we get to demand a lot more from legislators than we do. We just haven't done it. I think we've got work to do in terms of taking back the party from the inside. So that's what I believe, but I also think that this is an incredible opportunity for us to think about all of the structures that need to be redone, rethought of, and that includes the party structures.
Robert, that's great, Pramila, and I really appreciate that answer. I think it really speaks a great deal towards the future and the options that are on the table. Robert, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I have a lot of things I'd like to add. I think, no, she said it very, very well, and I'm just so excited that we have such an articulate and passionate Congresswoman. But I'd love to take other questions.
Fantastic. Well, with that in mind, we have a question specifically for you from Frank Pugh in Whitestone, New York. And I think, Frank, are you on the line?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. And hearing tonight's information, I do have an idea, and I'm going to kind of preface this by saying that the other night I reread a piece by Dr. Reich in The Nation magazine when several people were called to try to figure out an answer. What do we need to do to build a future to believe in? And Dr. Reich's piece was said, a third party versus big money. The organization idea that I have is built upon something that has already occurred, and that is the effort of of Senator Sanders, who I liken to our modern day Thomas Paine, Paul Revere. Single-handedly, he awoke thousands and thousands, millions of people, really, educated them, made them aware.
Frank, that is so true. What is the question you have for Secretary Reich, though?
I'd like to follow his reaction and others to the following. That Senator Sanders, now that he's not apparently going to be chair of the Budget Committee, actually consider stepping down from his Senate seat and actually leading an organization called A Future to Believe in.
That's a great question. Robert, let's hear what your thoughts are on that.
Well, obviously, I can't speak for him. I do think that what we're doing tonight, and it's kind of interesting, is we're talking about both the future of our country, obviously, but also of the Democratic Party. And indirectly, there's a question about, do we also need to be creative, thinking about another organization, and not necessarily a third party, but another organization that actually is a day-to-day organization in which we can be involved with at the local level, at the state level, keeping us up to speed on how we can resist what may be going on and push forward a progressive agenda. It's the kind of thing that Bernie Sanders did do. He did elicit this extraordinary energy and release the energy. The energy was already there. I suppose, it wasn't about Bernie Sanders. He was the first to say that. He would be now the first to say that. But it was about this progressive vision, getting big money out of politics, having a single-payer plan, making sure that there was tuition-free higher education and so forth. These are things that people believe in, they want, and they still do. As Congressman Ellison said, fewer than 25% of the electorate voted in Donald Trump. I mean, there is still a huge crying need for all of this. So while I can't speak for Bernie Sanders, I can speak for the need for an organization, whether it is the Democratic Party or by default, if it's not, it's got to be something else that mobilizes and organizes this energy for the good cause and to resist the bad things that are going to be coming.
Excellent. I think, Pramila, that we've got a really great question coming from you from Walter Tajaya in Arlington, Virginia. Walter, have you joined the call?
Yes, I have.
Great. Let's hear your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I want to mostly probably this question to anyone, but Dr. Robert Reich particularly, I completely agree with you about anger is not bad. Many of us are feeling angry right now, but the use of anger to create constructive change is the difference. And so the only thing I would add to that is nonviolent anger. And I think at times some of us in the progressive movement, perhaps, and I'm going to use us because I don't want to be excluding, I've been a little bit too wimpy in fighting and standing up with determination for progressive values, clean energy, transportation equity, equality, sound investments for local communities and stuff. And so now that we've had, and I hate to say his name, but Donald Trump opened the door for bigotry and feeling that that's a common thing, I'm looking as someone who was born in another country, my case in El Salvador, came to the U.S. at age 13, worked my way up, served for 13 years in elected office at the Arlington County Board, and now I'm in private world. I find it particularly frustrating that many immigrants are stricken with real fear and feel that they are targets now for any Gestapo-like deportation squad that might come even if they were born here, because it's not just for the undocumented, but a genuine fear. And so the question I have for you is, beyond going and criticizing people who might be in the establishment or might be elitists, what are the specifics that we need to be diving into? Because even in this call, I've not heard too many specifics about how we actually organize and how do we do it at the local level to empower and protect minorities, people of color, and build our coalition of progressives so that we can fight this bigotry. So what are the specific checks and balances in an organizing that we need to be doing? I realize You're probably not going to have a magical answer short in this kind of setting of a conference call, but I'm happy to follow up with anyone down the line and so on and dive into the movement, because there are people who now want to do something. I was one of those yesterday who was being cynical and who was saying this, my God, it doesn't work, but you know what? I've shaken it off. And I got to motivate myself because I happen to be in some leadership role in the community. And so I want to be able to tell people, calm down and be inspired, organize, move forward. So difficult question, perhaps. Can't answer in a few seconds, but we have real immigrants feeling the pain and stricken by fear.
Walter, thank you so much. Let's definitely give it a shot. Pramila, Robert, which one of you would like to try that first?
Well, I'm happy to go first because I think that is really how I got my start in political organizing. I am also an immigrant from India. I was born in India, came to the United States when I was 16 years old by myself, and I think that the fundamental piece that drove me was I got my citizenship in 2000. It took me 18 years to get my citizenship for a whole bunch of reasons I won't go into on this call. But then 9/11 happened, and honestly, I feel like a lot of what I'm hearing in the last 48 hours is very, very familiar to me. And we had literally the Bush administration, the passage of the Patriot Act, the abuses of civil liberties against Muslims and Arabs, and hate crimes against a lot of those communities, and then secret detentions. Detentions of 1,200 Arab and Muslim men. At the same time, a lot of raids on Somali grocery stores around the country. And that is how, I was one person. And I just said, we can't have this. And I had no idea I was starting an organization, but we did. And it ended up being, bringing people in to fight because the situation was so urgent. And I think that's the opportunity we have again. You said you shook off your cynicism, you're ready to get to work. There are multiple organizations that are already existing that we have built over the past many years for immigrants and refugees. The organization that I started right after 9/11, Hate Free Zone, is now called One America here in Washington State. It's the largest immigrant advocacy organization in the state, one of the largest in the country, depending on where you are. You may already have that organization or you may need to start it. But the reality is you can't wait for somebody else to do something, and you never know when what you are going to do is about putting a stake in the ground so that other people can come around you and form the kind of movement that really creates that sort of change. And, we passed the first ever ordinance to not ask immigrants about immigration status. We sued the Bush administration, stopped thousands of illegal deportations across the country, and, went on to fight for immigration reform. I mean, we are limited in what we can do only by our imagination. And if we really harness the power that we as individuals have, and most importantly, we as a collective have, there isn't a limit to what we can accomplish. And anybody who says it can't be done, I love to take those people on. I love to show that they're wrong. And so that is, I would just challenge you back to say, in the best senses of the words, to say that, there is a tremendous amount that you can do. And I hear it in your voice. You're ready to go. So the question is just where you channel that. And that really depends on where you are. But there is no question in my mind that our work today is not new. We have had to do this over and over again, and particularly those of us that are immigrants, and those of us that are people of color, those of us that are LGBTQ. These, in some ways, it's unprecedented that Donald Trump is the president. Of course, it's unprecedented. But in other ways, it feels very familiar in a strange sort of way. Donald Trump did not get to the presidency just out of the blue. This has been happening for a very long time, and we have a lot of institutionalized racism in this country to pull apart and tear down. But it happens through the energy of people like you. So I would just say congratulations, because it sounds like we've got another organizer, activist, movement builder who is going to pour energy into the specific organizations, and if they don't exist, start it. But DFA is certainly here, and I'm sure can help you with a lot of resources if you need them. But that is the specific. Nobody is going to tell you exactly what to do. It really is about taking that energy that you have, and I'm so grateful for it, and really putting it into the movement.
That's right. It's really well said. Let's take another question. We have Jill from Washington. Jill, let's hear your question.
Hello, everybody. Nice to talk to you tonight. I just wanted to preface this by saying since 1975, I've been a feminist, and the female side of me is particularly disappointed in the outcome of the election. And I just wanted to know, how much did you really think sexism played in Hillary Clinton's defeat? And if maybe we should have brought out the Hillary Rodham a little bit more this time around in her election.
Thank you. That's a great question. Robert?
Well, obviously it played some part. I mean, I remember back in 1992 talking to Hillary Clinton about, and she was asking me, why do they hate me so much? This is before even the Bill Clinton administration started, and she was already a target of a lot of animus, a lot of organized activity on the right against her. And my answer was, in part, look, you're a very strong woman, and you're a baby boomer, and you're very threatening to a lot of the old guard, and that hasn't changed. I mean, one of her big disadvantages and big handicaps was she had 25 or 30 years of this kind of, as she called it once, and I think she was absolutely right, a vast right-wing conspiracy going after her. But it was also about her being a woman, and misogyny is part of the problem, and Donald Trump represents that. And it's not new, obviously. I mean, the thing is that the hatefulness that Donald Trump brought to the surface is hatefulness that the Republican Party has been generating to divide and conquer the bottom 60% by income in this country over and over and over and over again. I mean, they have done it to preserve and entrench their power. Donald Trump is just the most extreme example. It's misogyny, it's racism, it's any kind of phobia you can imagine in terms of gays and lesbians, but it's also, they grabbed Islamophobia, and they did that even before Donald Trump made it into the centerpiece of his campaign. So what the Democrats have to do, one of the things Democrats have to do is to reconnect the white working class with African Americans and Latinos and women and professionals, and make sure that there is a coalition of the bottom 60% that can take on Trumpism and take on what is likely to happen. The question of how specifically is this going to occur, I think, is an organizing challenge, and I lay it right at the feet of the Democratic National Committee. If the Democratic National Committee is not going to be up for it, then by default there is going to be a void, and that void is going to be filled somehow. And that's either going to be a third party, or it's going to be some sort of organization that is going to mobilize and organize millions and millions of Americans to not only avoid the racism and homophobia and all of the misogyny and everything else that Trump has unleashed, but also to protect and improve their economic position in this country. Don't forget, this is all against the backdrop of median wages that are lower, adjusted for inflation, for a family, a typical family, than they were in the year 2000. I mean, 2 out of 3 Americans today is living paycheck to paycheck. And there's a lot of insecurity there, and the history of fascism and totalitarianism in the world is a history of people using economic fears and lassoing them to prejudice and bigotry to build their power base. This is nothing new. The only way you fight it is, as we keep saying, by people coming together, organized, mobilized together to fight both prejudice and bigotry, but also fight a kind of an economy and a political economy that where great wealth is infecting and corrupting politics to the extent that people don't really have a fair chance. It's rigged. It is rigged. I mean, Donald Trump talked about a rigged election. The election wasn't rigged, to my knowledge, but the economy is rigged. And when Hillary Clinton started off her campaign, she said the deck is stacked in favor of those at the top. This was the central focus of Bernie Sanders' campaign. We can't forget this. It's critically important.
Can I just
Please,
jump
Pramila,
in
please.
really fast on that question, and then I actually have to get off. I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to answer that specific question about sexism, and want to tell you that as a woman and as a woman of color, sexism is alive and well, and particularly for women candidates, it is very much a factor. And I was an early supporter of Bernie Sanders. But at the same time, I will tell you, I defended Hillary Clinton many, many times when I felt that people were not talking about her policies, which is why I was supporting Bernie Sanders, because I wanted him to pull the party back to the left. And but I really did not appreciate the comments that people would make about Hillary Clinton. And I think if you look at press coverage and how she has been portrayed, I think there's been a very unfair portrayal of some of what she, some of the criticism of her. I have no problem with criticizing her policies, but I really do believe that sexism played a huge part also in how people see her and her abilities and her ability to lead the country. There's just no question about it. And I'll tell you, just from a personal perspective, I have a campaign manager who told me yesterday that I was the first woman candidate he's worked for, and he said, I never understood until I worked on this campaign what women go through. And we've heard about it as male campaign managers. We've heard about it with male, people tell us that it's there, but he said, I've got a completely different understanding of it having worked on this campaign. So I just want to affirm that it really is a factor, and we cannot shy away from it in thinking about the future of this country. And that is, by the way, not directed only at men. 66%, well, I've seen different numbers, but a significant portion of white women voted for Donald Trump. Women of color, on the other hand, were one of the largest constituencies to vote consistently for Hillary Clinton, because I do believe that as women of color, we understand intersectionality. Even though I hate that word, it expresses what I'm talking about, the different ways in which race, class, and gender play together. So just want to say that we have got to work on this. And when you look at the comments that Donald Trump made that still exist out there in the world, and what they say about women and our role and our ability to make decisions not only about our bodies, but about the future of our communities as political leaders, we have a long way to go, and we are going to really need to address sexism as much as we address racism and classism in this country. They really are intertwined. And thank you all so much. I'm going to hop off, but thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Pramila. You're fantastic, and we're very excited to have you be going to Washington. And I think with that, we need to start to wrap up this call. But I want to say that this discussion has been vital. It's been vibrant. It's been so wonderful to hear from everybody on this call, your thoughts, your questions, the incredible input from Representative Ellison at the beginning, the extreme cogent and powerful impact of Congresswoman-elect Jayapal. And absolutely the words from former Labor Secretary Robert Reich. One thing that is clear, we've had an election here where income inequality played a critical role in the decisions that people made and how they were going to vote. Race played an incredible role in impacting how people voted, and sexism. All three of these issues are so interconnected, so intertwined, and such a powerful motivator for people to take action, both out of fear and out of hope. And I hope that as we move ahead and as we think about the things we're going to be doing, and we take this fight in 2017, both at the ballot box and to the streets and in our communities and with our allies and with our friends and family. And as we stand up in opposition to a Trump administration, we're all in this together. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to take care of each other. And now let's get ready for the next steps. Let's do what we need to do, and let's go out and make sure that we win the fight for tomorrow. And with that, I'm going to end this call with a thank you very much to all of you for participating tonight. Good night, and tomorrow, let's get back to work.